is a corpse hidden deep beneath the world, a body that never truly died, and from it, something is spreading, slowly, quietly, through the roots of the Erdtree itself. If you follow those roots far enough, past the silence, past the dark, you will begin to notice things. Small things, easy to miss. A shape in the stone that looks almost like a face. Eyes that seem to be watching, even when nothing is there. And if you keep going, deeper, further than most ever dare, you will find it. A body, still, silent, and yet not gone. This is the story of Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod to die, and the only one who never truly did. To understand what Godwyn became, we need to go back to a time when the world still made sense, before the shattering, before the wars between demigods, before everything began to fall apart. There was order, not perfect, but stable. The Erdtree stood at the center of everything. Its light, constant, unchanging, and beneath that light, the golden lineage ruled. Godwyn was part of that lineage, a son of Queen Marika, and Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. That alone would have been enough to define him, but it doesn't, because Godwyn is remembered for something else, not just power, but presence. There are figures in history who dominate through fear, others through strength, but very few are remembered because people chose to follow them. Godwyn was one of those few. The stories we have are limited, fragments, but they all point in the same direction. He was respected, and more importantly, he was trusted. That kind of trust doesn't come easily, especially in the lands between, where power usually comes with a cost. And yet, Godwyn seemed different. And then, the war came. It didn't start slowly. It didn't build over time. It arrived all at once. The ancient dragons, creatures older than the Erdtree itself, they descended from the sky and struck at Leyndell, the capital, the heart of the Golden Order. And for the first time, its walls fell. Think about that. Not during the shattering, not during the wars of demigods, but here. This was the moment. The capital was broken. Fire rained from above. Lightning tore through the sky. Stone cracked. And for a moment, it must have felt like the end. And in the middle of it, Godwyn fought. We don't see it. There are no detailed accounts. But we know enough. He did not retreat. He did not hide. He stood, and he fought, and eventually he faced one of them, Fordysax, not just another dragon, one of the greatest, the kind of being that defines a war. And yet, Godwyn didn't just survive. He won, but what matters is what he did next, because he didn't kill him. He spared him, and that that moment is easy to overlook, but it changes everything, because war usually ends with destruction, one side gone. But this time, something else happened. Godwyn chose mercy, and Fordyceax responded in kind. They became allies, not out of necessity, but out of respect. And from that, something new was born. The dragon cult, Knights of Lanedell, learning the power of dragons, lightning woven into gold. It's a strange image. Enemies becoming something else. But that is what Godwyn created. Not just victory, but change. And this is important because it shows us what kind of person he was. Not just strong, but willing to choose a different path. And that is why what happens next feels so wrong, because someone like that should not end this way. The night it happens is quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like something is about to break. Later, it would be called the Night of the Black Knives. But at the time, it was just another night, until it was, somewhere, a fragment was stolen, the rune of death, something that should have been impossible, because death was not part of the world anymore. It had been removed, sealed away, to create order, a world without true endings. But that night, death returned, not fully, just a fragment, but enough to kill a god. The assassins moved in silence, unseen, unknown. By the time anyone realized, it was already happening. They found Godwyn, and there was no battle, no final stand, only restraint. And then they carved a mark into his flesh, not a wound, something deeper, a curse. And at that exact moment, everything changed, because somewhere else, another demigod died, and the curse was split. Godwyn received only half, and that is where the world breaks. Godwyn received only half, and that is where the world begins to break, because death is not something that can be divided. It is meant to be whole, complete, an ending. But on that night, that ending was taken apart, split between two lives. One lost the body, the other lost the soul, and Godwyn lost something far worse, because when his soul was destroyed, there was nothing left to guide the body. No will, no thought, no self. And yet, the body remained, alive, still breathing, still existing, but empty, and that should not be possible. There are rules, even in a world of gods, and one of those rules is that when something dies, it ends. But Godwyn did not end. He remained, and no one knew what that meant. At first, there was confusion, then fear, because this had never happened before. A demigod had died, but not properly, not completely, and that made it worse, because a clean death can be understood, but this could not, so they did what they always do. When something cannot be understood, they buried it deep beneath the capital, at the roots of the Erdtree, a place considered sacred, a place where the dead are meant to return, where life begins again. It was meant to be an honor, a way to give Godwyn peace, to return him to something pure, but they didn't understand what they were placing there, because Godwyn was still present, not in mind, not in soul, but in form, and that form was not stable. Something had been broken, something fundamental, and slowly, over time, it began to change. At first, there was nothing obvious. The body remained still, unmoving, but beneath the surface, something was happening, a slow transformation, not sudden, not violent, but constant, like something growing. In the dark, Godwyn's form began to lose its shape, not all at once, but piece by piece, until what remained was no longer what it had been. The Golden Prince was gone, and in his place, something else began to form, something unnatural, something that did not belong to life or death. His face changed, not completely, not at first, but enough to feel wrong. The features remained, but they stretched, shifted, lost their meaning, and if you were to see it, you would recognize it, but only for a moment, before realizing something was deeply wrong, because it is not just a face. It is a memory of one, and that memory is decaying. This is where the corruption begins, not as an explosion, not as a sudden curse, but as a slow, inevitable spread, because Godwyn's body was placed at the roots, and the roots connect everything. They run beneath the world, through stone, through soil, reaching places no one sees, and whatever touches them becomes connected. So when something is wrong at the root, it doesn't stay there. It spreads, slowly, quietly, unnoticed. At first, small signs begin to appear, strange growths, unfamiliar shapes, emerging from the ground. Nothing obvious, nothing that would cause alarm, but something that feels off, like the world itself is slightly out of place. Then the eyes appear, small, pale, watching, not moving, not blinking, just there. And if you look closely, you begin to notice something. They are not random. They are familiar, because they resemble him, Godwyn. His face begins to appear, not whole, not complete, but fragments, pieces, echoes, as if the world is remembering him, or worse, becoming him. This is not decay. understand it. This is something else, something spreading, something growing, and it does not stop, because there is nothing to stop it. Godwyn cannot die, not fully, and so what remains of him continues, expanding, reaching further, through every root, into every place, and from this, something new begins to form. Not life, not death, something in between. Those who live in death, they are not born, they do not grow, they simply appear, rising from the ground, returning again and again, because they cannot leave. They are trapped between two states, just like him, and that is the truth of what happened that night. Godwyn did not just die. He changed what death means, and the world has been trying to deal with it ever since, but it cannot, because the problem is still there, deep below, still growing, still spreading, and still unfinished. And the longer it remains, the worse it becomes, because this was never meant to exist, and yet it does, and somewhere beneath it all, Godwyn the Golden still remains, not as a man, not as a prince, but as something the world cannot correct, something it cannot erase, only endure. And that is where the true horror begins, because this is not the end of his story. This is only the beginning. At first, no one understands what is happening. The changes are too small, too slow, easy to ignore. A strange growth here, a whisper of movement there, something seen and then forgotten. But over time, those small things begin to connect, patterns begin to form, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it, because it is everywhere, not just beneath the capital, not just near the roots, but far beyond, in places that should have been untouched, in lands far from Lanedale, in ruins, in forests, in forgotten corners of the world. The same signs appear, the same shapes, the same eyes, watching, waiting, and always connected, because the roots reach everywhere, and through them, so does Godwyn. This is Deathroot, not a single thing, but a network, a spreading presence, carried through the veins of the world. It does not move quickly. It does not rush. It grows, slowly, patiently, like something that knows. It has time, and perhaps it does, because nothing is stopping it. No force is pushing back. No power is containing it. It simply continues, expanding, reaching further, touching more, and wherever it reaches, something changes. The ground becomes wrong. The air feels heavier, still, as if the world itself is holding its breath. And then the dead begin to rise, not violently, not suddenly, but quietly, as if they were never meant to leave. Those those who live in death. They are not monsters, not in the usual sense. They do not rage. They do not hunt with purpose. They simply exist, walking, wandering, repeating something that should have already ended. And if you watch them long enough, you begin to understand. They are not choosing this. They are not resisting death. They are trapped, caught between something that ended and something that never finished. And that is why they cannot pass on, because death was never completed. It was broken, and they are the result. Echoes of that broken moment, fragments of something unfinished, just like Godwyn, because at the center of all of this, there is still a body, still buried, still connected to everything, and still changing. Godwyn is not simply a corpse. He is a source, a beginning, something from which all of this flows. And the longer he remains, the more it spreads, the more the world changes, the more the line between life and death begins to blur, because that line no longer exists, not the way it should. And once that boundary is gone, everything becomes uncertain. Nothing ends properly. Nothing returns the way it should. Everything lingers, and that lingering becomes something else, something heavier, something wrong. There are places where the corruption is stronger, places where the roots run deeper, where the connection is closer, and in those places, the signs become impossible to ignore. Large growths, masses of flesh that do not belong, faces fully formed, not fragments, not echoes, but complete, as if Godwyn himself is trying to emerge. Again and again and again, it raises a question, one that is difficult to answer. Is this just decay, or is it something more? Because decay usually leads to less, but this creates more forms, more shapes, more of him. And if that continues, if nothing stops it, what happens then? Does the world become something else? Does it change entirely? Or does it simply fill with him endlessly, spreading, repeating, until there is nothing left but echoes? And this is where the fear begins, because this is not a single tragedy. It is not contained. It is not isolated. It is everywhere, and it is growing, quietly, slowly, without resistance. And the worst part is that most people never even realize it. They see the symptoms, the wandering dead, the strange growths, the eyes in the dark, but they don't see the source. They don't understand where it all comes from, because the truth is buried, hidden, deep beneath everything, where no one looks, where no one wants to go, because something about it feels wrong, even without knowing why. And yet, that is where it all leads, back to him, back to the body that never truly died, still resting, still connected, still spreading. Godwyn the Golden is no longer just a memory. He is part of the world now, woven into it, flowing through it, and as long as he remains, nothing can return to normal, because the world itself has changed. The rules are different, the boundaries are gone, and death is no longer an ending. It is something else, something uncertain, something incomplete, and somewhere deep below, Godwyn remains at the center of it all, silent, unmoving, but never truly still, because even now he continues, not as a person, but as something far more dangerous, a presence, a force, a mistake that the world cannot fix. And the longer it continues, the more it spreads, and the more it spreads, the harder it becomes to ever stop, because this is not something you can fight, not something you can destroy, not something you can escape. It is already everywhere, and it all leads back to a single night, a single moment, a single broken death, and the one who carries it, Godwyn. At some point, people began to notice that this was not just a spreading corruption. It was something more, something that should not exist within the Golden Order, because the Golden Order was built on a simple idea that life and death had a place, a structure, a balance. Everything had a role. Everything had an end. And that end was meant to be final. But Godwyn does not follow that rule. He cannot, because his death was incomplete, and because of that, everything connected to him becomes incomplete as well. Those who live in death are not just wandering corpses. They are evidence, proof that something is wrong, because in a perfect order, they would not exist. They could not exist. They would pass on. They would return to the Erdtree. They would become part of the cycle again. But they don't. They remain stuck, and that is what makes them dangerous. Not because they attack, not because they spread violence, but because they break the rules. And the Golden Order cannot accept that. It was never designed to handle something like this. A death that isn't death. A life that isn't life. Something in between. So it reacts the only way it knows how. It rejects it. Those who live in death are hunted, destroyed, burned away, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity, because if they are allowed to exist, then the order itself begins to lose meaning. And if that happens, everything begins to fall apart. But no matter how many are destroyed, they return again and again, because the source is still there, deep below, still spreading, still growing. Godwyn cannot be removed. He cannot be corrected, because what happened to him cannot be undone. And that is the true problem. Not the dead, not the the corruption, but the fact that the system itself has failed because the Golden Order removed death. It tried to control something that was never meant to be controlled. And for a time, it worked. The world became stable, predictable, safe, but only on the surface, because underneath, something was missing, something necessary. And when it returned, it did not return cleanly. It returned broken, split, incomplete, and that imperfection spread through Godwyn, through the roots, through the world itself. This is not just a tragedy. It is a consequence, a result of trying to remove something fundamental. Because death is not just an ending. It is part of the balance. And without it, things begin to change. Slowly, quietly, until the chain can no longer be ignored. Godwyn is not just a victim. He is a symbol, a reminder of what happens when the natural order is altered and the world is still dealing with that mistake, even now, because nothing has replaced it. Nothing has fixed it. The system remains broken, and everything connected to it continues to suffer. Those who live in death are not the cause. They are the result. Godwyn is not the cause. He is the consequence. And the deeper you look, the more you begin to realize this was never going to end well, because something so fundamental cannot be removed without creating something else, something unexpected, something uncontrollable. And now it is too late. The roots have spread too far. The corruption has reached too deep. And Godwyn remains at the center of it all, unmoving, unthinking, but never truly gone. And somewhere in the silence beneath the Erdtree, the world continues to carry the weight of that mistake, slowly, quietly, without end. Even now, deep beneath everything, Godwyn remains, unmoving, silent, and yet not alone, because there was someone who refused to accept what had happened, someone who remembered who Godwyn was, not as a corpse, not as a mistake, but as a friend. Fordyceps, the same dragon who once stood against him, the same dragon whose life was spared, returned, not for war, not for vengeance, but for him, because what happened to Godwyn was not natural. It was not something that could simply be accepted. And so, Fordyceps tried to change it. He descended into what Godwyn had become, not into the world above, but into something deeper, a place that should not exist, a space formed from what remained, a dream, or something like it, a reflection of a body without a soul. And within that place, Fordyceps fought, not against Godwyn, but against the corruption, again and again, endlessly, trying to push it back. trying to stop it, trying to save what could not be saved, because somewhere, in what remained, there had to be something left. A trace, a fragment, anything. But there was. Godwyn's soul was gone, completely, irreversibly. There was nothing to return to, nothing to restore, only the body, only the spreading, only the silence. And still, Fortisax remained, fighting a battle that could never be won, because some things cannot be undone. And over time, even he began to change. The corruption did not stop. It did not slow. It reached him, touched him, began to take hold. Even a dragon could not resist it forever. And so, the one who came to save him became part of it, another piece of something broken. And that is where the story turns, because this is no longer just about Godwyn. It is about everything that followed, every wandering corpse, every silent figure that refuses to stay dead, every root that carries something wrong. It all leads back to that night, to that moment, to that broken death, and the one who carries it. Godwyn, he is no longer a prince, no longer a warrior, no longer the man who spared a dragon. He is something else now, something the world was never meant to hold, a presence, a silence that spreads. And yet, there is something about his story that remains, something that lingers beneath all of it, because before the corruption, before the spreading, before the horror, there was a man who chose mercy, a man who ended a war without destruction, a man who was respected, trusted, remembered, and that memory still exists, faint, distant, but not gone, because even now, when his face appears, in the roots, in the dark, in the silence, it is still him, changed, broken, but still connected to what he once was. And maybe that is the most unsettling part. Not that he exists, but that something of him still remains, not enough to return, not enough to be saved, but enough to persist, to continue, to spread. And as long as that continues, the world will never fully heal, because this was not just a death. It was a fracture, a break in something fundamental. And fractures do not disappear. They remain hidden until something touches them. And then they spread just like this. And somewhere far below, beneath the roots, beneath the silence, Godwyn the Golden still lies, not resting, not gone, but waiting, without thought, without will, and yet never truly still, because even now he continues, quietly, slowly, endlessly, and in that stillness, in that silence, In that slow, spreading dark, the story of Godwyn never truly ends. It only continues.